Hi, welcome to the Practical C# video series. I'm Andrea Angella, and in this video I want to talk about named and optional parameters in C#. Here I have a console application, and I have a sum function that takes three integers, a, b, and c, and is returning a string with a sum of them, and the sum and printing also a, b, and c. And as you can see in the main, I'm actually calling sum, passing 10, 20, and 30. Okay, so if I run this, you can see that I'm saying A is 10, B is 20, C is 30, and the sum is 60. Okay, starting from C#4, is now possible to pass the name, to use the name of a parameter when you actually call a particular function. What I mean, like here, you could say C, for example, and provide 30. So this actually produces the same exact equivalent code. But you can also do different. You can just say, okay, I want to make this C and this B. So now when I call this, you see now B is 30 and C is 20. So I've changed the actual order of the parameters because I actually providing the name of the parameter. Okay, that's very important. Another thing that's very important, however, is that it is not possible to pass individual parameters, required parameters afterwards. You need to do first pass the required parameters, and then you can actually pass the username parameters afterward. Okay, so the most important things to understand here is that if you make if you expose some API in a library, now the name of the parameters is part of the public API. So this means that if, for example, I'm using this one and I change this to use D, for example, I'm actually breaking every single client that is using my library if they use the named parameter in their code. So it's very important to consider this. Excellent. The other important reason why this might be useful is that sometimes using the named parameters in the call can actually improve readability, especially when it's not very clear which parameters, what each parameter means, especially if they are of the same type. Okay, what also has been added is the ability to provide optional parameters. So this means that you can assign a default value for a particular parameter. Let's say I want to say that C is always 100, so this still compile, but this also means that I don't need to pass a third parameter if I don't want to, and 100 will be used instead as a default value. If I run this code, you see that C now equals 100, even if I haven't passed that when I call it. Okay, and I can go further. I can say, all right, this one is going to be 10, right? So this means that now I don't need to pass two parameters. I can just pass A, and then A will be 10, B will be 10, and C will be 100. Okay. The interesting bit is that I can also say, right, I want to pass a subset of optional parameters. I can only just pass C to be 1000, right? So this means that I'm going to use the default value of B, but I'm going to actually override the default value of C to be 1000. So let's see, and now C is 1000, and B is actually 10. That is the default value. Okay, now I want to show you something very important. Let me switch into JetBrains.pick, that is our .NET decompiler. This is free. You can actually right-click and say decompile source, so that we can see what the actual what the compiler generates when we actually call a function that has optional parameters. As you can see, it's quite interestingly, the compiler always provide all the three parameters here, despite we haven't provided all the values when we actually wrote the code. And the compiler automatically copy the default parameters here, like this one. In the first call, we only pass 10, but automatically copy 10 and 100 that are the default values of B and C. So the important lesson here is that the default value is copied across all the actually callers of the function. So this means that if you build a new version of your library that changes the default values of a function, all your clients still works at runtime, but they are going to use the old default values. Okay, so if you really want to make a change to the default value, you need to recompile all the clients so that the actual default values, the new default values, will be used. So it's something very important to keep in mind. Said this, so the optional parameters are quite a nice feature that has been added in C#. So you can create a function that takes a lot. You can provide optional default values for many parameters so that you can simplify the client so that you don't need to specify all the parameters if you don't need to. One example is, for example, creating a constructor with many arguments, and you only provide a subset of them when you want to construct a class. But another very important use case is, for example, when you want to do Office interop. And in this case, there are a lot of functions that takes a huge number of parameters, and most of the time, those parameters are null. So if you need to interop with Office, this feature is going to be very useful for you. Thank you very much for watching. So if you want to stay up to date with C# and .NET, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.